know, this is Food for Thought Thursdays with Dr. Rogers under Mental Health Talk. In this episode, the shows are basically to create that dialogue around COVID and continue the dialogue around mental health, everything mental health, to create that difficult talk about mental health as well. So I'll introduce John. John Fuller is an independent licensed clinical social worker. John has over 20 years experience in providing mental health services to a diverse population of men, women, and children, and in diverse settings that include his work at a private college located in Maryland. Welcome, John. Welcome to Food for Thought Thursdays with Dr. Rogers.
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Rogers. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You know, I wanted to get you on in here. I've had several speakers come in and talk about COVID and how COVID has impacted their lives, especially the restrictions surrounding around COVID. Hi, Tanya. How are you? I just introduced John Fuller. We're going to continue talking about COVID. John, you're currently working at a college, so I thought it would be especially important for you to come on and talk about your experiences, especially with COVID, because we're going to have students on in a couple of weeks talk as well. So being in a college environment, so how's the virus impacted you, like with work at school?
Well, how it's impacted me is our counseling office went totally online, so I don't even go into the office. This is my home office, so I do go into my home office, but in person-to-person counseling, we're not doing that. Everything over, we use Microsoft Teams, which is encrypted end-to-end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at the college?
I do counseling.
Mm-hmm.
I do mental health psychotherapy, just like sessions, pretty much like the sessions that you do.
Yeah. Have you heard that the students are having a difficult time at all?
Well, it depends. There are some students that struggle with being at home, and there are some students that being at home has improved their grades. So it's a mixed bag, like with many things. But COVID, I'd say, certainly has impacted all of us in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I asked that question because I know we're working with veterans. When I was working with veterans, you know, they look forward to that one-on-one. Sometimes we become their coping systems. So they look forward to that one-on-one, face-to-face therapy and counseling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have some students that may look forward to that undivided attention that counseling can provide. But I really work hard in my practice to connect individuals with resources and for them to try to find a lot of other, either on campus or at home, because we have some students now that are back on campus, but in the room still doing all remote learning, and I'm still doing remote counseling. And we still have probably over half students are still at home. So it's still kind of mixed even this semester.
Yeah.
But I get lost in my thought.
That's okay.
Earlier in the day for me.
So do I. That's okay. So yeah, I heard that schools were, you know, soon returning to school, and I know that some of my friends, their students are in college or back in school now too. But they're in a classroom, or they're still doing online, or they're back in the classroom.
So what we're doing, and this is what I'm seeing, like just from the couple of schools that I've heard about from other friends or colleagues, is that each school is kind of doing something different. Like everyone's kind of writing their own rules. So how our campus decided to handle it is all last semester, before Christmas, like the fall semester, everyone was home, everything was online. And there were very few students on campus, like special situations. If a student was, let's say, like homeless, or if their home environment was less than desirable, well, not even less than desirable situation going on at home,
Yeah.
that it was just better for them to be on campus.
Yeah.
But this semester, they allowed mostly first year students, since they didn't have that experience last semester. So mostly first year students, and then some select other students that provide kind of like mentors that would provide support to first year students. And then there's some other students that may have jobs on campus. And so we're not doing in classroom, even though they're on campus, they're not doing in classroom work. Everything is still remote.
Okay.
Even my sessions, and I don't foresee ours really changing counseling going in person, because we're co-located with health. And I know I won't go back into an office with health services, because that's where they're testing for COVID. So it doesn't make sense for me to go back or to bring healthy students into a potential exposure environment.
Exactly. Yeah. Because again, I've talked to students and they're like mixed. Some students are missing school. Some students, are okay with being home. And a lot of times I found that socialization piece, some students enjoy that socialization piece, being with other peers and being with having that engagement, and being home and not having that engagement has been difficult for a lot of students. And then you brought up something else, because I know I heard on the media at some point, sometimes students have difficulty because they have services at the school, like food services and shelter services. So they rely on those services as well at the school. So it's difficult, and it increases anxiety for some students.
Yeah. Food insecurity is a real thing, food insecurity on college campuses. I can remember being back, I probably would have been identified as food insecure when I just buy a bunch of ramen noodle, and that's what I was going to eat for 2 weeks until I got, some additional money from either jobs I was working or parents.
Right. Exactly. So how has COVID impacted your social life since you've been working from home?
I mean, it's what social life?
It's impacted my social life.
So, I mean, well, kind of, I always say not a lot. Like, I'm okay being a homebody. So, at this point in my life, at this age, probably if I was younger and probably definitely a college student age, I'd be like, I need to go somewhere, I need to do something. But at my age, I'm kind of like, this is good. Let's see what's on Netflix.
Right. I know you and I were just talking about going. I had asked you anyway to go to a restaurant with me, and you were like, no way.
I was like, no. I don't need additional risk. No. Even when I get my second dose of vaccine, I'm still going to be like, there's still that percentage. Like, I like you, Leslie, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that next week. Just because you get a vaccine doesn't mean you don't have to be safe. You still have to be safe and take precautions. It just reduces the risk, potentially, right? Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. So when we talk about, how COVID has impacted your social life, just that, right? Not being able to go out and be engaged as you once were before the pandemic. Or not being able to engage in extracurricular activities, right? I love going to restaurants, and I can't say that I've stopped, but I've reduced. I've cut back a bit. I still keep safe. I still wear masks, but when you get in a restaurant, you take your mask off, right? So, but not going out. I haven't been to a mall or, where there's heavily populated folks there. I haven't been.
Yeah, so like I have no need to, I don't need anything, so I don't need to take that risk. So I have been to restaurants, but it'll be outside seating, or if you have a closed-in porch type seating with heaters.
Right.
To me, it's all about the airflow. So I'll go look at a place and be like, no. Or if it's a larger venue that there's just a lot of space, I'll go. And if there's not a whole lot of people in there.
Yeah.
So I have
So,
a lot of connectors
yeah,
where I'm like, yeah, I'll eat here.
definitely. So have you found that there's any benefits from being able to work from home?
But before we go to that, keep that question. Let's bounce
Okay.
back. You were asking me about my social life. So my social life is what I want it to be currently. So I have friend networks that we get together on Zoom or whatever, other social media platform. I have a group of friends where we play, I think it's Evil Apples, but it's pretty much the game like Cards Against Humanity, to
Yeah.
where there's like a group, you have to have at least 3 people play, but you have a question, or I can't remember. I haven't played in a little bit with this. But then one person votes on which card fits best.
Mhm.
It'd be kind of fun. Just kind of trying to stay connected with a group of people, of at least 3 people, because you can't play with 2. You need someone to judge the cards. But the
Right.
more people that you have, a little bit better. But the problem with that, where I kind of stopped, is in the rounds, like if someone doesn't take their turn, the game kind of freezes. So I would get tired of them, and I would be like, "Oh, is it your turn?" I'm like,
Right.
"Oh." Sometimes I'll text them like, "Come on, you're gonna play. Let's play. If not, I'm out."
Right.
But there's all types of things. Just using phones and group text and FaceTime and just calling, or even write a letter. If it's
Right.
an old art, the post office still works. Might be a little bit slower until we get it all figured out, but there's a lot of
Right.
things we can do.
Yeah. And that's why I asked that question. I love to ask that question about, what do you do to maintain engagement? Because I get the questions, people ask me, so what do we do? We can't leave the house, especially older population, right? Younger population, I give ideas about just getting in your car and taking a drive. But what if, we have older populations, especially when I was working with veterans, older veterans that are afraid to leave the house because they're immunocompromised, right? So what do you do in the home to kind of be engaged? And I like what you said about, going on to Zoom. I had encouraged people around Thanksgiving to do Zoom, Zoom family meetings, around Thanksgiving and Christmas, right? So being creative, right? And thinking about things that,
There's all types of things. Like just
yeah,
Google what do I do?
right.
Like Google will send you like a list.
About everything.
But Sling TV, I used to have Sling. I stopped Sling for DirecTV, I think I have now. But Sling has a watch party where you can watch.
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, so you can watch a show. But I also learned how, or maybe figured out how to Zoom and watch until they change it. Because they have these updates that like kind of catch stuff because they don't want people doing stuff. But if you're in a Zoom meeting and I can share my screen of my Netflix on my computer, and we can all sit and watch Netflix
Yeah.
while we're in a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. So let me tell you what I did with 2 of my girlfriends. And she's not on here now, but we had a movie night and we started a movie at the same time. We turned the movie on to our TVs and pushed play at the same time and held the phone, had our speaker on while we watched. And I did it with 2 of my girlfriends. And but it's being creative, right? Have a movie night.
It is, but that can cause that sound bouncing back and forth. So do the Zoom meeting and share your audio, and you won't have all that.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you. I'm going to have to try that. I know Zoom has Jeopardy on there because we play Jeopardy on there as well.
Yeah. I haven't played it. There's a lot of different things, because there's a lot of this is the world. So people that are writing programs and stuff are trying to capture markets. But be careful, because I like watching documentaries. So what I spend a lot of time doing, over my COVID time, is watching documentaries, and one of them was on kind of like social media and like various games and just digital. And one of the takeaways that I took from it, I don't remember the exact show. I almost want to say Hacked, but that may not be it. On Netflix, But the takeaway was, if you're not paying for a service or a product, then you are the product. So be careful of free things, because if you're not paying for like a game, then they're getting your data. You are the product, your information.
Thanks for that tip. Yeah. Thank you. Now we'll go back to that question about are there any benefits to you, being home from work? And I asked that question because, when, we had talked about that before in a prior session, and like a benefit for me is I'm able to work on my brand or work on other things that I would not have necessarily been able to work on while working in the office.
Well, I'm just as busy, if not busier, at home. So I don't have a lot of extra time. In fact, I think I have less time to get coffee in between people. So back-to-back sessions. But I don't. So I never really had a long commute because I live actually like a mile away from my office, which I still drove. Sorry, environment. But it does cut down on just having to just kind of leave the house. I'm a homebody, so I don't mind that. I still leave when I need to and go to the grocery store, but I don't.
And that's the thing, though, being able to leave out and even go to the grocery store. There's people that just won't leave the house, and with me, I find myself, I get down when I stay in the house. When I just don't leave, don't get outside at all, I feel myself, I sometimes get down. And, some people are okay with that. Like yourself, you said that you're okay with that, So being able to feel like you can leave outside of the house and be safe, right, without being around a large crowd of people.
So I always ask students or people that I'm working with, like, so how much of it is that you're kind of feeling like you're being told you can't leave? Because I think a lot of times psychologically, like when we're told we can't do something, when we really want to do it. And I think just kind of shifting the thought around, like, I can't leave the house to just some other thought of, is it really worth leaving the house? So even if I could, and I can go run around anywhere, like, and you invited me to a very nice steak restaurant where I'm like, my stomach's like, oh yes, but I'm like, no.
Right. Yeah.
But really that, it's not that you aren't able to, but that going out, like really thinking about the potential risk either to your own health or to the health of someone you love. Because over 50% of individuals with COVID, they're asymptomatic, which means you have no symptoms at all.
Yeah. You're right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because you're absolutely right. I disclosed on the last segment that my mother was diagnosed with COVID. And, when I called, she's in dialysis. When I called the dialysis place, the director's response was, well, I checked fever. No one has a fever. Right. So which says that, people can, enter that establishment because they don't have a fever, but they're COVID positive. Right. So you're absolutely right. And I absolutely agree with that. Being able to be careful, but being able to, being mindful that places is just not 100% safe. Right. Again, I have to tell myself that too. So you're absolutely right. I still go out to restaurants. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. But I don't go to a lot of restaurants. There's social. I pick and choose. And I'm sitting like in a corner somewhere away from people.
Yeah. I mean, even like I think everyone should live their life however they want to live it, but also be mindful. Don't go live your life and go to a packed restaurant or sit up at the bar. Because I see that all the time. People sitting at the bar, their mask off, and not.
Oh, goodness, yes.
I don't like socially distant. I keep saying, will forever say, physically distant from people.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not worth that risk.
Right. Exactly.
Just not knowing, and there are also people that get COVID that just don't care.
Yes.
Living their life, and I have. It's just a cough or just a small symptom, and then you have other individuals that have to work.
Yeah. And that's my fear. Yeah, that's my fear. Someone has been exposed or a COVID positive and don't quarantine, right? And let's talk about that since we're on that subject. Are there any anxieties? Like, what are your anxieties around this? Again, my anxieties are, going into public and someone is COVID positive or, has been exposed and don't quarantine.
I guess so I've been working in mental health, and even before that, even when I was younger and was a lifeguard and had CPS and first aid, and so at a very young time in my life, and when, not right when HIV came on, but shortly, like years after, one of the things that they're taught was universal precaution. So with universal precaution, you just assume everyone has it. And then you take the precautions with everyone, not just select people. But so when I go out, like, I just think everyone has COVID, and I don't necessarily avoid them, but I don't stand close to them and breathe a lot. I do what I need to do and keep going, and maintaining my distance, or just walking by them really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And absolutely. You talk about that, talk about coughing, I can't, I have allergies real bad. And if I cough, get that stare. Right. So it is, and you talk about mental health and how and that's why I think this is a great discussion for mental health, because how we, look at others and how we go into this safety mode, right? And let me tell you, when you're anxious and you're experiencing anxiety, we catastrophize.
Yes.
We blow things up.
Let me clarify. So with universal precaution, I assume everyone is, but I don't treat everyone as if they're positive. There's a difference in that you assume all the precautions as if the other person is. So even if it's a friend, like if I were to, meet you or run into you at the grocery store, I'm still going to try to be a cart length away from you. Which isn't typical. We're not used to that. And I have people that will come closer and I'll just keep moving. I'm just dancing around the cart. Because people like to get close.
Right.
And there's some people that are okay with that, and other people I just say, I have a big COVID bubble. and we'll keep the time that we're talking down. Now, if we're outside and there's some air flowing, it's a little bit different. We can be a little bit closer.
Yeah. And, now we're on that. I just want to talk about this. This wasn't one of the questions, but I'm going to talk about this for a little bit. Anxiety, right? Talking about anxiety and, how anxiety can stop us in our tracks, right? Anxiety can stop us in our tracks in a sense where we become so anxious, right? Because of this pandemic, because of this virus, we become so anxious, we just start to avoid, right? And it becomes a part of us. And avoidance, to maintain those behaviors, are to stay in a house, to not go out, then that's maintaining those behaviors because it keeps me safe, right? So again, being cautious, and I encourage people all the time to think of healthy ways to be engaged, to get out, just go in the car and take a drive if you can, right? Or
I encourage people to exercise and to walk. So to get out, walk to a park, and if you're in a safe area, if you can. But just getting out into nature, I mean, I would encourage that even before COVID times. I don't think this human body was really designed to be in a house and in a chair or in an office building. I think we were designed to be of this earth and to get out and experience the earth and reconnect with it.
right.
Where I'm at, there's snow, and I went out earlier and took some photos and walked around and enjoyed my time in the snow. But we do need to get out and exercise. So move.
Yeah. And if you can, if you can't, the idea is to think about creative ways to, be engaged and be active, right? And something else you said earlier, what were we doing before COVID, right? Some of us before COVID, we weren't going out. But now you said something that was really interesting earlier. It's now that we're being made So again, mental health, right? When you think about how our brain works, now we're being told we can't do something. Uh, so what's
Yeah,
that?
there are many individuals that, now that we're being told, like, there's a lot of people, especially over wintertime, there's a lot of people that wouldn't be going out anyway. But now they're
Right.
like, oh, I'm stuck in the house. And I'm like, but that's nothing new. Like, so think of it as an extra long winter. I think one of the things at the beginning of COVID, how we kept getting this message that it'll be over soon. So we were priming our thoughts of, this is going to end soon. I don't have to do this long. And we kept getting met with disappointment when that didn't happen. And we kind of, some people, I didn't, because initially with COVID, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a while. Like, this is going to be like a year, 2 years, not, oh, in a couple months. I'm like, I don't care what that man says.
Right.
This is not going to just disappear. And I think a lot of people really wanted to hear that. So they really, really kind of bought it and was expecting that. And when the times just kept getting, pushed from, when it warms up, when spring comes, and then, in the middle of summertime, it's going to burn out just like, whatever. But no, that's not what it didn't do. And then even when you get everyone vaccinated, well, one, if everyone gets vaccinated, there's so many individuals that have such concerns over being vaccinated.
Right.
I took my first dose a couple weeks ago, and my arm hurt a little bit more than a flu shot, but
Yeah.
I'm feeling pretty good. After one shot, I'm now, according to New England Journal of Medicine study that they put out, I'm 80% protected, or not necessarily fully protected, but it will decrease the likelihood of me getting the worst version of COVID or even dying from COVID. Has just decreased my risk down to 20%.
Right.
That's pretty significant. And so when I get the next dose, I think it bumps it up to like the 90-something%. In my head, I'm like, that's good, but that's still not, I'm going to go to every restaurant I want to, I'm going to, it's still, I can get it, and I can probably get a version of it that is more asymptomatic where I can spread it to other people. So I need to think about the people I love and care about, or even my neighbor, or even someone I would feel horrible, even if it was someone I didn't even have thoughts about. I would still feel horrible if it came down to I was the only person that had close contact with them.
Yeah. And I encourage people to do research on the vaccine, to help you make that decision. I've had my second shot, and I was one of those ones. I was resistant. Let me tell you, when they first came out, I was like, no way. It's too new, too novel. But I did a lot of research. I spoke with physicians about, their research that they did on it. And, that helped me make my decision. So I encourage anyone that's watching to do your research.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Do your research.
With any research, be aware of the source. Like, you want quality sources. You don't recognize the name of whatever institute, is not a good source. And if you're a person of color, and you have a white doctor, you can seek out a doctor of color so that you can feel a little bit reassured in what the person is telling you.
Right. Excellent. John, so one of the questions that I've had is, what are your thoughts, or what are your thoughts on creating dialogue to children about the restrictions on COVID? Again, some children have anxieties about returning back to school. Some children are having anxieties about non-engagement in the home. What are your thoughts about that? What advice would you give in creating dialogue to children around COVID?
I think every parent, really knows how to talk to their child, and just taking COVID and breaking it down to, your child's language, breaking it down to things that they understand. And there are just going to be some things that they're not going to understand. And you can even say that you're not going to understand this right now, but that's okay. But I think be supportive, listen to your children, hear what their concerns are. And even if in your mind, you're like, that's absurd. You're thinking with an adult mind, not a child's mind, that can have incredible leaps of fantasy that things don't line up. So really don't dismiss some of their things, but really talk to them and be like, oh, like, no, that's not how that is. And just kind of correct whatever misguidance or misthought, because what they're doing is they're putting pieces together themselves from stuff. And you may just need to kind of like, oh, let's talk about that. Let's kind of deconstruct that, or children won't necessarily understand deconstruct, but let's take those Lego blocks apart and figure out, what pieces of information, or let me hope in more to stuff. So some of it's going to be you educating yourself, like what are the concerns with children going back to school, and what are some of the guidelines, and what are your concerns? Because oftentimes as parents, our anxiety and our concerns, even if you haven't voiced them to a child or to someone else, we pick up on that, especially a child-parent relationship. They pick up on it. They can sense something. They may not say anything, because I know if they grew up in a home like I grew up, where a child is seen and not heard, I would not dare ask anything of my grandparents, because I grew up with my grandparents, if I thought it was something that was a hot topic to them. Like, I wouldn't ask questions anyway, but if I really knew it was a hot topic, and like COVID, this is not something I would have, it's not guidance. It's sometimes even recognizing that your child may not come to you and just talk to them and just kind of ask them.
Yeah.
Instead of like having your child come to you, let's say if you're in another room or in your chair, go to them, go to their room, go down to their level, and just kind of ask them, just kind of talk to them, like, what are your thoughts about school? Like, are you missing it? Are you just ask? They'll tell you if you ask them. Well, many will. And sometimes adding a little bit of play in there, doing something. That's one of the tricks as a clinician is, oftentimes, especially the young ones, and sometimes the teens too, will be like, all I did was play games. I used to be really good at pickup sticks. Uno. I was Uno master. You would be amazed how much young individuals will talk to you, and especially the teens that are like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm like, okay, you want to play Uno? All right. I was like, because if not, this 45 minutes is going to be a long time.
Right. Yeah.
I do this for a job, so I can do it. So we can play Uno or not. You'd be amazed of just letting some time pass and not pushing topics, of just asking and seeing what comes out, and not doing anything like, did you hear me?
Yeah.
You're thinking, give them time, say the question, and then kind of move on, kind of, like a boiling pot, like you turn the heat on and prep it, and then you go do other things. Don't sit and watch the pot boil. Just kind of ask the questions, and the child may come back immediately and answer you, or just need some time. Like, they might be trying to figure out what they may not have really thought about school in that way.
And oftentimes I know that I've said to, it's important to normalize their experiences, right? I'm a discloser. I like to disclose, and I'm working with people when it's appropriate, right? But with children, disclose how you feel as well. If I'm anxious about something, then I disclose how I feel so that I can normalize their experiences too. Because when you talk about COVID in the pandemic, it is anxiety provoking, right? So, they're getting information, we're getting information, we're watching the news, we're getting information, they're getting information from their schools. We're seeing vicariously, we're seeing on the news how people are impacted by COVID. We're having personal experiences of personal experiences of COVID impact. And so we're getting a lot of information. And because we're humans, we take all that information and then we start to put it together in our own minds.
Wow.
And
usually wrong and out of order.
Right. We start to make sense of things too. And if making sense of that means that, we got to be wise and we got to stay in the house all the time and we got to be shut in because otherwise we're going to get sick and die, right? Because if it's out there, if you catch COVID, you're likely going to die, right? Which is not true necessarily, right? But, and having these discussions with your children, like, this is what we see, this is what we see out there. This is the information we're getting. But what pieces of this information is true and what pieces are myths, what pieces are not true, right? And kind of have that discussion. And so I think it's important to try to validate these experiences with children as well, because children are smart. They're really smart.
Right? Brilliant. Yeah. The biggest thing, like with COVID, is to keep in mind that really the guidance that they've been saying from the beginning, like washing hands, keeping physical distance, wearing a mask, and even before Fauci was coming out recently with wearing a double mask, I was wearing a double mask back at the beginning because my thought was, if one mask is good, then it's only going to decrease my risk if I wear another mask if I can still breathe. So to me, that was a no-brainer. Like and I will take that blue mask, and often the commercial ones, like I have some from Target, you can slide it inside. I like the wire nose brim. Mm-hmm. Even when I didn't have a mask and had bandanas, I slid one of those blue ones up so I could have the nose bend. So being, looking at what they're saying, I see a lot of people out there wearing the really thin, like the gaiters, like that's it's like bigger than my t-shirt. Like you just using common sense should tell you that that's not going to much protection.
So John, really quick, not to cut you off. Let's read Michelle. Let's read a comment real quick. Michelle says, kids see you as human and feel that it's okay to be unsure and have concerns when parents are vulnerable and transparent. Absolutely. If you can show your children that you're vulnerable and you're anxious or you're having certain types of emotions, it teaches them how to talk about their emotions as well. Most of the times we don't talk about our emotions, but when you're transparent and able to talk to children, and not even children, to your loved ones, etc., about your emotions, then it validates that it's okay. It's okay to talk about my emotions.
Yes. However, with children, I would give the caveat of maybe not have your full reaction.
It's not appropriate
For children. So,
is what I like.
Your internal anxiety may be up to a 10, but you need to dial that down to like a 3, 4, so that it doesn't like really think like, oh wow, like I've never seen you. Like you can say that you have anxiety, but you don't have to necessarily show like in your head and your mind, like I don't know, like this is. You need to do these conversations for behind locked doors where children can't hear them, but you can express like I don't know. Right. Mm-hmm. But I do know that.
Right. Because we don't know everything. It's okay to say, I don't know. But again, the idea is to validate and normalize their experiences, right? Letting them know that it's okay. Right. Michelle says with kids, be measured. Any other questions? Just jump in, guys, and ask questions from John, and we'll read your questions. Any comments, make comments. So John, what about boundaries? We often talk about boundaries in the home, looking at the media and things of that sort and creating boundaries in the home. What's your take on that?
So that's a wide. So what do you mean by boundaries in a home? Boundaries for who? Boundaries between parents and children? Yeah. Boundaries in news and social media, digital, like what?
Yeah. So one of the questions that I had from one of the viewers we talked about in prior sessions was prior episode is being able to balance out watching the media, to kind of reduce anxiety as opposed to having family time, etc. So creating those boundaries in the home to kind of, you don't watch the news all day, every day, because, I believe that, again, we talked about taking in all that information, it could increase anxiety, perpetuate anxiety.
Oh, it
What are
will.
your thoughts? Yeah.
It will increase anxiety. So if you have anxiety, then you need to be very limited on what you allow to come into your being. So the same as, if you're like I am, I need to be aware of how much sugar I take in. I may like the sugar, I may want it, but I still need to set boundaries with myself and recognize if I do that, then there's going to be, consequences. The thing with like digital or news or just negative content, we don't necessarily see the immediate effects of that. So just even knowing, like even on days when like something news is breaking, don't allow yourself to sit there and just ingest all of that 24/7. And if you have anxiety, really I would tell you to kind of reach out to a friend, can tolerate news input or a lot more information, and just get updates from them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't need to consume all that. You can just get little updates from them about what's going on, that you're not sitting there being kind of drawn in and taking on this anxiety of not knowing something, and reassuring yourself that we don't know right now, but what are the facts? Mm-hmm. Are we going to have any new facts anytime soon, or is this something we don't have any facts and it's going to be multiple days?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But limiting news and social media, and if you have negative people in your life, also limiting your exposure to them, and in the most polite and nicest, kindest way. But I will tell you, like, I'm not like we can talk about all this other stuff, but this negativity, like I can't take that in right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that conversation is different with different people. Like I know with Leslie, I can be a lot more real, like, I can't. Like another point, I might be like, I hear you, I understand, but I'm not in a good place to hear about, what negativity that I've been kind of isolating from.
Yeah. So one thing you said earlier is knowing your limits and knowing your, what makes you anxious, and knowing and being able to self-monitor, right? Being able to self-monitor and engage in skills that can allow you to understand, oh, I can't watch this because this is going to make me anxious. So I'm going to have to limit that, how much I watch that, right? Especially when you're talking about media and things around COVID or media itself. We're last year in particular, we went through a lot with the pandemic, with the racial tension, the political debate. We went through a lot that, let me tell you, I brought a lot of stuff home with me. I was anxious, right? And working in a veteran population. So it was anxiety provoking, right? So being able to figure out what type of self-care you should engage in can kind of, and for me, self-care was to turn the TV off, to look at something. And I think I said this in a prior episode that I just bought Disney Plus. Disney Plus, because it helps to kind of relax me, right? And I don't take all that seriousness in, right? Because everything is just so serious right now, right? Just so serious, right? So Disney Plus helps it. And I don't watch, I think, every Disney movie on there. But thinking of, right. So thinking of ways that you can, and again, being creativity is that buzzword, right? Being able to be creative and understanding what can help you reduce anxiety. Any questions, any comments? Hey, listen, several people are watching. What are your comments on what do you do to kind of de-stress, to de-escalate that anxiety during this time? Just jump in and give comments. What do you all do? Maybe what you do can be helpful to another reader on here, another viewer. So absolutely.
Why don't you read that comment?
Huh?
So why don't you read that comment? I can't see it.
Oh, let me read it. So Michelle Bryan says, a great discussion. John, you are great.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, you know what, that should help you. And, giving people positive praise, right? can help decrease anxiety. What are other ways to kind of increase anxiety during this time? John has given a lot of information about working with children. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, John?
I always have something to say. Always. One of the things that I've been recommending is if you have Netflix, to look up Headspace and Headspace Guide to Meditation.
Yeah.
So a lot of people hear meditation, they're like, oh, it's that thing where, you have to sit and not think about stuff. I can't. That is like above doctorate level meditation. There are many levels that are well below that. And Headspace will start you with just the basis of what meditation is, and it has little I don't want to say vignettes, but it has little mini meditations that are just things that be trying to teach individuals in session. The biggest thing, even before meditation, is just breathe. Like, we just don't breathe enough. And just those 2 deep breaths, like, since I've been probably teaching, lowering anxiety with breath, like, I can feel it all the way through my body with 2 breaths. Like, my system knows, like, oh, I know what we're going to do. We're going to relax. So, if you do it long enough, just breathing and changing your breath and taking control of the breath can really help manage your anxiety, not just in the moment, but long term. But back to the Headspace, it has like 5 to 8, I think, different episodes, and they're like, I think, under 30 minutes. You'll have to look on Netflix. I don't remember.
And if you have an iPhone, Headspace is on your app too. You have a Headspace app as well.
So Headspace, it does have its own app, and it's a pay service. There's like some free things, but again, if you're not buying the product, then you are the product. But with the Netflix one, it is just a video. And what I liked about it, I didn't like it first because I thought it was kind of childish, but it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's animated, but it is some level of animation. I found that after that first episode, I actually kind of found it kind of a little bit more relaxing than if I was watching people. So try it. Let Leslie know if you don't like it, and then she can tell me. But I've received more positive feedback. My thing is, like any tool that any clinician or someone gives you, not every tool is good for everyone. And sometimes the tool is just not good in that moment. It may be a year, 2 years, later, that's, a tool that someone suggested, it might work. So, if it doesn't work now, maybe try it again, at some other point.
Yeah. And mindfulness meditation is, again, I'm a stickler. I love mindfulness meditation. It helps you to relax. It helps you to become in tune with yourself, with how you're feeling in the moment, right? It's in the moment. And then it allows you to just relax and reset right in the moment. It allows you to, with deep breathing, it allows you to relax and reset. And I love it. You can go on YouTube. Again, I gave Sarah Raymond Mindful Movement as a resource. But let me tell you, once you go onto YouTube and pull up a mindful meditation video, tons of them pop up. And then you choose what fits you best, right? What works with you best. What I use might not work for you, and what John uses might not work for you. But you'll find once you pull it up, more resources will pop up, and then you can pick and choose what you would like to use. Before we wind down, any questions? Again, any more comments, questions? John, are there any? I did have a question for you. Somebody asked me, and I think we talked about this earlier, but we can repeat it just really quickly. Any advice on child appropriate activities in the home? We talked about like drawing, or let me say this, and then John, you can jump in. Someone brought this to my attention. You know how you go to paint parties and you have like the easel and you can paint? I thought that was just an excellent idea and an excellent activity, a family activity, to just have a paint party in your home with you and your family and paint. And they have apps where you pull up the apps. I didn't know this. and the apps will serve as the person, the facilitator of the party. And you can paint. I thought that was an excellent idea for an activity.
Yeah, I think it's a good activity. I think just YouTube pretty much is everything. So there's probably like a paint party YouTube.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe you could do a live paint party.
How about that? That would be something. Resources, and look up resources. Google has been my best friend since this pandemic, right? Like John said earlier, you have to be mindful of the resources that you pull up. Some might not be as credible as others, but YouTube, Google ways, to talk to children about the pandemic, Google activities to do in the home, right, with your family, to have that family time. Be resourceful, look up your resources and be creative, right?
I think earlier in the prep, we had talked, or you had mentioned this question. I said, well, there's probably at this point, a Sesame Street video that's out there on COVID. I would be surprised if there isn't by now, or if there's not been a couple episodes.
Yeah.
And I forget where Sesame Street is now. It's on a pay.
I don't know. I haven't seen that since my son was a kid.
And I don't have kids.
Guys, okay. So any other questions or comments for John while we're here?
No.
Any final words from you, John?
This was really fun. Thanks for having me. And what I like to always tell everyone is, because a lot of times I think we question like how we're feeling, and is it okay? And yes, however you're feeling, whether you're COVID anxious or kind of COVID free, it's okay.
Non-judgment.
Like just but try to be thoughtful about if you're COVID free and I mean free, like just free spirited, and you have a partner or a friend or a roommate that and that was actually one of the sessions I had earlier today, is one of the students, they're not sharing rooms, but they're sharing a suite, and so they have a common area in their own bedrooms. And the one student was telling me that the other one is just like really like, oh, COVID, it's okay. And the one I'm talking to has anxiety, and was like very much like, no, it's not. I talked about how to have a conversation with the individual that is feeling a little bit more relaxed about COVID and doesn't have as many concerns. That's just a conversation that they need to sit and have and come up with some guidelines of how they're going to live together. And I know I have friends that's been something that has come up before in homes where everyone may be feeling a little bit different about COVID and how to approach it, and then you can just talk about let everyone talk about where they are, like whether they're anxious about it or what, and it's not
Right.
not to say they're silly but to try to demyth some things, because there's been a lot of misinformation, and it still is a lot of bad information out there, but there's still a lot of good information, and so break down to the core things. As long as people are washing their hands, using hand sanitizer or spray bottle of alcohol, and using a mask and staying distance, like that's a lot. It's where people are letting it kind of come down below their nose, and there's somewhere, well, you could be breathing it in. So you just want to kind of make sure that you can touch the mask, and I always keep hand sanitizer on me, and just spray your hands so that you're not moving COVID around if it kind of landed on you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Excellent last final words. And I'll also add to that, again, be mindful, be respectful to each other. Do your research with respect to the vaccine. Let people make their own decisions as to whether or not they're going to get the vaccine. I think that's really important. And I just want to say before we end, so, again, this is COVID Awareness Month for Mental Health Talk. Food for Thought Thursdays with Dr. Rogers. Next week, we're going to have on the 18th, is on the 16th and the 18th. The 16th is Instagram Live. The 18th is Facebook Live and YouTube Live. We're going to have Dr. Natasha Kalia come on and talk about the vaccine. I think that's very important because there's a lot of questions out there about the vaccine, right? And how it serves to protect us from the virus. She's going to be on. And then to close out COVID Awareness Month on the 25th, I'm actually going to have students on talking about I want to see from their perspective how they've been impacted by COVID. And I'm hoping to have a child psychologist on that segment as well. So I will definitely keep you guys updated on that. I hope that you guys will continue to come. And I thank you for supporting me on this venture.